Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada Open House Webinar 2022. My name is Tunggul Wicaksono from the Research Division at ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada, and I'm very honored to be here as the Master of Ceremony for today's event. First of all, I'd like to greet our esteemed speaker, our Executive Director, and also our moderator for today's webinar. Good morning, Mr. Muhammad Takdir, Director Jung Yong, Dr. Alan Chong, Ms. Prodita Sabarini, and good morning, Dr. Davri Agus Halim, and also good morning, Ms. Yulida Nuraini Santoso. Thank you very much for making the time to participate in today's discussion, despite your busy schedule, and we are truly honored to have you here with us today. It's actually the first very time for our center to conduct open house webinar. The main theme we are going to raise in this event is about the engagement of academia in community building. We find this issue interesting and important to discuss because we have seen the increasing trend of higher education growth in the region for the past few years. And we think this also can be catalyst for advancing the economic, political, and socio-cultural development goals within the region. But before we begin the event, I'd like to inform all participants of today's webinar that the discussion will be conducted in an open discussion mode. So if you have questions or opinions you would like to convey to our esteemed speakers, please kindly drop your questions and opinions through the live chat box, and we will raise the questions in the Q&A sessions later. We will also provide e-certificate for all participants who join today's event, and to claim the e-certificate, you will have to fill out the evaluation form through a link that will be shared after the discussion. All right, to start today's webinar, I'd like to welcome our Executive Director, Dr. Davri Agus Halim, to deliver his opening remarks. Please, Dr. Davri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tunggul Wicaksono, for the opportunity for me to do kind of opening remarks on this event. His Excellency Bapak Duta Besar Ambassador Muhammad Takdir, Alan Chong, Lee Yong, and Ms. Prodita Sabarini, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished participants, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Davri Agus Halim, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada. It is my pleasure to welcome to the eminent speakers, panelists, and the participants for the today event that titles The Engagements of Academia in Community Building. This forum is a part of varieties of our effort in research and outreach initiatives aimed at increasing ASEAN people engagements. In addition, in this virtual room, we aim to advance the discussion by inviting scholars and practitioners in particular fields. The theme of the open house covers the issues of academia engagements in the societal development, particularly in the effort to build a sense of communalism where the academia can play a key role to answer the current challenges. In times of crisis, academia is often become the first point of contact. Academia has been referred to have a natural part in the society. Consider Indonesia as evidenced by a study undertaken by the Conversation and CARI, C-A-R-I, discovered there are over 14,000 early career researchers in 2020, out of the total of 216,000 researchers. In the regional context, ASEAN is potentially will become the home of young academia with about 20 million students in tertiary education. However, the increasing trend of the academia is being disrupted by the social and political events. They have recently taken over the role of academia in specific expertise. Recent phenomena, the post-strat, for instance, have challenged the relevance of the evidence-based research in the field. As a result, the role of academia is often overlooked. In the existing circumstances, academia can collaborate with stakeholders to build a sense of stronger community. Rather than to be an independent institution, the academia is supposedly to serve as an analyst in acquiring in-depth knowledge of problem and solution. This is typically research. Furthermore, the academia can complement the role of policymakers in identifying specific solutions for the related issue. Keeping aside this as an engine driving development in society, academia must be prepared to answer upcoming challenges in the basis of both education and research. This event is designed to answer all of your hesitations, to provide you with a unique opportunity in exchanging views, and finally to come up with the valuable recommendation. It is my hope that you will acquire up-to-date information from panelists in regard of the role of academia in community building. I look forward to open and constructive debate. Before I end my speech, it is an honor to present you with the ASEAN Studies Center's company profile to give you a glimpse of our institution's activities. Lastly, I wish you a most successful webinar. Thank you and good morning once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duffy, for the wonderful remarks. I believe your views will inspire the audiences of this webinar. And now we will proceed to the next agenda, where we will proudly present you the video of ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada Outlook for 2021. And so without waiting any longer, let's watch the video together and please enjoy watching.
Hello, my name is Yulida Santoso, and I'm the Managing Director of the ASEAN Studies Center. Our center is hosted within the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of Universitas Gadjah Mada. Our pool of researchers consists mostly of teaching staff from the various departments of the faculty, from neighboring faculties, as well as partner institutions of the university. Our work consists of research and publication, as well as various engagement efforts to the wider community, and this includes university students and the general public. As a research center, our aim is to bring ASEAN closer to you, which has also been made our tagline. In doing so, we want to push for discussions on critical debates surrounding ASEAN. We want to delve deep into the contemporary issues and understand how this affects us as part of the ASEAN community, and most of all, engage the youth who we believe are the next generation of this rapidly developing region. We also work closely with other research institutes, youth groups, universities, missions to ASEAN, diplomatic networks, and like-minded organizations. With strong belief in the potentials of ASEAN, we envision an ASEAN that is strong, resilient, outward-looking, prosperous, and we know and believe that you do too. And with that, we welcome you virtually to our center. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, my name is Tunggul Wicaksono, the Research Manager of the ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada, and I'm very pleased to welcome those of you who have interest in joining this event. As many of you have known, working at Research Center is very exciting and challenging at the same time. Working at ASC UGM is no exception. Since its establishment in 2013, we have done research and released publications in various topics related to ASEAN, from political security, economic, to social issues. We've got them covered. Those research were published in various forms such as infographic, policy brief, proceedings, working paper, journals, books, and last but not least, our flagship program, ASC Monograph. Previously, we published several policy briefs related to the women and children rights advancement in the region and the policy prospects concerning to the Myanmar crisis. We also published several books, including the most recent one, The Evolution of the ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism, Institutional and Thematic Issues Within. And about our research, as mentioned earlier, we recently have a collaborative research project with Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, which explores the role of e-commerce in economic recovery during the COVID-19 pandemic, and have finished the annual monograph project in 2020 titled Small States, Strong Societies, Essays on COVID-19 Responses in Southeast Asia that examines the inequalities among Southeast Asian states in handling the pandemic through the lens of state capacity, societal resilience, and regional and extra-regional cooperation. As of now, we are working on the research projects in gender mainstreaming, which will be incorporated in ASC Monograph 2021. By raising a theme of advancing Southeast Asia through gender mainstreaming, we aim to increase member states' commitment and awareness on gender mainstreaming and intensifying cooperation between member states in the effort to eradicate gender-based alarming issues. And other than that, we will also focus on ASEAN Chairmanship 2023 as the major theme for our research project this year. Aside from that, ASC UGM has strong engagement with China through the network of ASEAN-China think tank, where we regularly organize series of meetings to discuss emerging issues on ASEAN-China relations. ASC UGM allows a cross-divisional working scheme that enables research division to work with the program division in organizing our flagship events such as International Conference on ASEAN Studies, or ICONAS, and ASEAN Youth Initiative Empowerment Program, or also known as AoIP. Aligning with our tagline, bringing ASEAN closer to you, we are delighted in inviting you to share ideas through ASEAN Note submission, get involved in our events, and also join the internship program at ASC UGM.
My name is Dias, and I am a program manager at ASEAN Studies Center Universitas Gadjah Mada. Looking at ASEAN Studies Center UGM as a research center, the program division of ASC UGM is responsible for supporting the dissemination of research activities and output to the public by creating programs and events. These function in line with our commitment to bringing ASEAN closer to you. We have developed interesting programs for our audience. This program falls into two categories. The first category is our regular event that aims to provide a platform to discuss ASEAN. Programs such as Bincang ASEAN is a talk show inviting people of ASEAN to discuss interesting topics. And Ambassadorial Lecture, in which we invite diplomatic communities to share their aspiration and ideas about ASEAN. We also took a unique approach in developing our regular program to bring it closer to audience. For instance, we have Bincang ASEAN Realism, where we invite our audience to watch a short documentary about ASEAN and discuss the issue with the movie director and experts from the field. The second category is for flagship events. Launched in 2016, ASEAN Youth Initiative Empowerment Program, also called AoIP, is our short course that aims to not only engage with ASEAN future generations, but also to develop initiatives among the youth in ASEAN-related issues. The unique feature of our short course is that it is designed to be centered on the voice of youth in order to value their aspirations and ideas for developing ASEAN future. Last year, we had approximately 80 graduates from ASEAN member countries, as well as neighboring countries such as Japan, India, and China. ASC UGM collaborates with its partners to provide a necessary support to increase youth participation in the program through scholarship and tuition fee waivers. This year, we are very excited to launch the AoIP 2021 e-learning edition, which can be accessed by anyone at any time from anywhere. Last but not least, the Program Division of ASEAN Studies Center UGM supports programmatic events that serve various topics and themes, such as the 10th anniversary of the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and the Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, ACWC, the enactment of the Network of ASEAN UK Think Tanks, the Network of ASEAN China Think Tank Working Group Meeting, and many more. We will also provide the opportunity for youth, especially students, to join our internship program. Sounds exciting, right? And there will be more to come. So thank you for your enthusiasm. Please stay tuned to our website and social media and hope to see you at our upcoming events. See ya!
And now, having the opening remarks delivered and also the video presented, we will begin the webinar right away. And I would like to invite Ms. Yulida Nurani Santoso, who will lead us to the introduction of our speakers and as well to bridge the discussion today. Ms. Yulida is a teaching staff of the Department of International Relations and Managing Director of the ASEAN Studies Center of Gadjah Mada University. And having completed her undergraduate degree from Gadjah Mada University studying international relations, she went on to read international public policy at UCL, or University College London. And Yulida previously worked at the ASEAN Secretariat facilitating political cooperation and is a chevening scholar with areas of interest in transnationalism, oil and gas, and ASEAN in its political security context. So, without further ado, Ms. Yulida, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Mas Tunggul, for the kind introduction. I hope I'm audible. Please let me know if at any point in time my voice is inaudible so I can adjust. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining our event today and welcome to the ASEAN Studies Center's virtual open house of 2022. I have the utmost honor of moderating today's talk on the engagement of academia in community building. Today's discussion will take place in the format of an open discussion. As such, our panel of speakers will engage several critical topics from the various perspectives. To introduce you again to the event, this virtual webinar is aimed twofold. Firstly, to introduce the work of our center to the academic community, partner institutions, students, and the general public. As you may have viewed from the recent video, at the same time, we also hope to use this event as an opportunity to engage the public and reflect on all issues surrounding ASEAN, particularly in our role as researchers. Now, with the premise that higher education serves as an important ingredient for the acceleration of economic, political, and social cultural development in ASEAN, it is without doubt that the academia can play their role in contributing to the regional development through their expertise and actively engage in emerging and critical issues. Now, in mention of emerging and critical issues, we would also like to thank those of you who have participated in our poll. Our poll, as you may see on your screen, from your submissions, we learned that a majority of our poll takers are researchers and part of the academia themselves. We also note that among the many emerging and critical issues, most of us are particularly keen on the developments of SDGs and the pandemic. Next in line are issues of economic growth, followed by global politics, the climate crisis, and also social security. Other than that, there is a great interest on issues of globalization, transnational crime, the labor market, and technological disruption. Our poll takers, when asked to choose from two options, are also of the view that academia should engage more with policymakers in the making of a sound and holistic policy. Lastly, in answering how we see research initiatives responding to challenges of the future, our poll takers are confident that the academic community is able to serve this purpose despite the challenges ahead. So for this reason, we have invited a panel of esteemed speakers representing the various elements of the ASEAN society who have helped to shape the narrative of ASEAN, the intellectual discourses and efforts of community building as a whole. So as I mentioned, our talk today will adopt the style of a talk show. Kindly note also that our talk adopts Chatham House rules. So views of our speakers are of their own. So please use your discretion in disseminating information taken from this talk. Now, for the audience joining us from home, I will also invite members of the audience to take part in asking questions during the open discussion. So please use the chat box feature to submit your questions. And if you please, you may also use the raise hand feature, and I will try and accommodate as many as time allows. So before we start with the open discussion, I would like to start with our first guest who will deliver a keynote speech, Mr. Muhammad Takdir, who is the head of the Center for Policy Strategy for the Asia Pacific and Africa region from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Muhammad Takdir has prior experience in several Directorate Generals, including social and cultural information, as well as politics. He has also served a number of assignments, including economic functions in Ottawa, Vienna, and Geneva. Mr. Muhammad Takdir was formerly part of the UN Observer to East Timor in 1999, part of the negotiation team of the officiating of the Bank of China in 1999 to 2000, and part of the OPEC legal team in 2007 to 2008. And with that, I wish to welcome Pak Muhammad Takdir. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Yuli. Good morning, Dr. Dapri, Dr. Chang, Mr. Yang, and Ms. Sabarini. It's very a great pleasure for me to join this discussion, this panel, and I have presented my presentation. Hopefully, can cover in the 15 minutes because a lot of issue in there. So please be kindly remind me if I'm exceeding my time, because you know diplomats, like I said, likes to talk, and when she or he talks too much, too many, and many things, and what is it, from the issue of outer space to seabed authority beneath the ocean. So please remind me if I'm exceeding, so we can efficiently run our meeting effectively as schedule. Upon receiving, I'd like to share my slide first. Upon receiving the invitation from ASEAN Studies Centers, I was a bit hesitant whether I'm the right person to speak about how academia utilize their expected expertise in responding to the emerging issues as laid down in the term of reference of this program. And you have many guiding questions in there, and I think difficult to answer, at least from my perspective as a foreign service officer. Then in the seconds, I figure out that maybe ASEAN Center or ASEAN Studies Centers of Gajah Mada wanted me to talk about academic engagement in community building in the context of foreign policy exercise. Therefore, to help my talk or talking points, navigating my talk and talking points in this regard, I modified those guiding questions in the term of reference and put it into this one big questions, which is what is the framework of academic contribution to foreign policy making in the face of global challenge. To start with, I would rather saying that, hold on. I would rather say that people in the foreign policy circle still struggling to connect foreign policy as part of important segment of public policy to direct interests of people on the street. In the language of your term of reference is how we in the foreign policy circle can impact the community building in our respective countries. And this is bring us to the next important questions. How academia help us filling the gaps of foreign policy machinery with the well-being of the people in the main street. For example, how every decision within ASEAN Beautiful Conference can bring benefit to the people who sell shoes in the Cibaduyut, Bandung, or small retailer in Makati district in Manila. Or how Indonesian chairmanship in G20 with buzz and blitz of the camera and media in our marathon meeting in the next 11 months, I guess, or 10 months later, could affect the lives and future of local garment market in Tanah Abang, Central Jakarta. This is a very simple questions raised by ordinary people, and we will see in the slide how the survey shows us that there is a disconnected feeling among the community with the ASEAN itself. But because of the reason that we are now seeing a phenomena, what we call as a foreign policy goes local, meaning everybody or every citizen can advance diplomacy. Everybody can contribute to the change of new global landscape affecting our national standing in every aspect of lives. Amidst the trend of foreign policy goes local, people like ECOWISE, for example, Indonesian actor and martial artist, can effectively marketing globally the Indonesian traditional martial art, Pencaksilat. After filming his role in Raid 1 and Raid 2, and a very famous film admired by many movie makers. And if you compare to our embassy probably in Berlin, we need a couple years just to promote our national martial art Pencaksilat to the people in Germany. So if you compare with the instant effect that bring by ECOWISE, this tell us why foreign policy goes local is very important, that complement to the role traditional roles play so far by the MOFA.
Move the car for like days.
You can see also how the city of Sao Paulo, for example,
Is that my people?
have signed many international agreements, more international agreements rather than the city of Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, or receiving more dignitaries, foreign dignitaries from overseas rather than the president of Brazil himself. So I think the concept of foreign policies goes local, really mobilizing citizens to advance diplomacy and cooperation in the new global landscape, and this is include the academia. But I have sort of some small note on how the academia and foreign policy can work together. I think there's a gap. Yeah, there's a gap between those two professions, where in case of ourselves, people say we look in the ivory tower. Foreign policy is a luxury business. It's a serious business, but it's very expensive and also only play at the level of high politics. That's the perception. And maybe also it's the perception towards the academia. I don't know. I mean, maybe the panelists can share their thought on this. But academia luckier than us because you have like three dharma perguruan tinggi, or we call it three dharma perguruan tinggi, or three ethics of dedication of higher educations. So learning and education, research and development, and third, education towards the society. You have that, and we don't have. I mean, the foreign policy circle that don't have that. We used to have like 7 caraka under the ministry of under the minister of Hasan Wirayuda in the past. It's called Satwa Caraka. What is it? The 7 caraka in the Sanskrit language. But actually, it's a vision. It's a vision mission. Not like what you have a 3 dharma perguruan tinggi that guides you in developing community building. Foreign policy circle don't have that. So for this time, I think when we see how this profession develop and impact the society, there is a big challenge there. I mean, the academia who has a long analysis with the foreign policies circle, who like to see to problem solving or being pragmatic in every aspect of issues rather than studies the issue. Like in the negotiations, we don't want to study the negotiation, how is it run, how it's going to be put forward by our colleague, but we just want to see, for example, like the proposal of negotiation. What is it inside? Then we study, but not like you study methodically the negotiations, because it's the scholarly process that probably did by the academia. But by foreign policy circles, we go directly into the needs to have end result, and that's the difference between the two, and I think it needs to be bridged. But if you see a couple of examples here, where academic networks in Norway, for example, complements the Israeli-Palestine proposal resulting in Oslo Accord. Also, academic contribution perfected the concept of conflict resolution, which is now used by UN High Commission for Refugees. And we have many figures coming from academia, academic circles. Henry Kissinger, Ahmad Davutoglu of Foreign Minister of Turkey, 2009-2014. He has a document called The Strategy of Turkey Futures, and is still used by the Foreign Ministry of Turkey. We have Adam Malik and Muhtar Kusumatmaja. Even Muhtar Kusumatmaja, the late Muhtar Kusumatmaja, may be the only person on earth who can expand the territory of Indonesia, cover the many waters without war, by bringing the concept of archipelago in the 1950s. So this makes me optimistic that people in academia and people in foreign policy can work together. And if you see most of the the influence scholar from the perspective of the policymaker, in this case is foreign policy circle, foreign policy officer, they pick mostly Joseph New, Samuel Huntington, Henry Kissinger, because of their talk on this very specific issue that affect many lives of many people. Even if you see like Samuel Huntington, U.S. political scientist who's famous with the mantra of clash of civilizations. Many people use this. Many countries in the West use this theory that the future wars would be fought not between the countries but between cultures, and they put successfully Islam as the one of the spotlight, and then this brings a difficult for us to deal with. Henry Kissinger too, Francis Fukuyama, who's famous with the book The End and the History of the Last Man. This shows by using different vernacular of interest and orientation, we can sense a contrast preference between academia and or scholar and policymakers in foreign policy circles when they pick their reference. The next slide. So, in general, I think there are two roles the two can play. The academia can play academic research and critical thinking, maintain a critical thinking. It is important to probably provide a better informed foreign policy that can be used by foreign policy who seek to problem solving. If we have a better informed foreign policy, it means in the simple language, garbage, a very good output, a fine output will produce a fine outcome. But vice versa, if you have ill-informed foreign policy, it's simple, just we can say garbage in, garbage out. So it is important that this kind of critical thinking provided by the academia and probably used by the foreign policy circle, because we have manifest this in every cooperation we are doing with the LPM UI, University of Indonesia, in many projects, mostly in economic projects. They provide us with the data, quantitative data. We did also with the Gajah Mada, as mentioned our colleague before, in the study of e-commerce that probably this year we will put forward before the ASEAN communities to be discussed. That might be hoped to be included in one of the priority during the Indonesian ASEAN Chairmanship 2023. To be equally sharing the stage, I think foreign policy circle and academia should determine and put in place these four practical orientations. We said, I mean, the foreign circle community set the articulation of the national interest and the tone of the political will. Then the academics or academia maybe can assist us with the data-driven and more clarity on every issue. That's very important for us. And of course, there are elements. There are many elements, I guess, of enablers and barriers in the process of communicating these issues between the academia and the foreign policy circle. And to bridge the gap, as I talked earlier, through mutually intensive communication and collaborations, we need to identify those enablers, those things, those barriers that will fill the gap so far that happening between academia and foreign policy circle, because we have a differences in information and knowledge. For example, the academia has access to informations academically, but we have an access, and they don't have access to real event, what happens, like what happens in Ukraine. Academia maybe get the information from the media, but we get the real information from the field, from the embassy, from people there. So this is the one of the differences. Maybe it could be enablers, it could be also barriers, but we can combine. in the case of project of e-commerce, we have ASEAN Studies Center of Gadjah Mada University to have a discussion with the embassy across the Southeast Asian region. We provide, we gather all the embassies and put them together with ASEAN Center Studies to discuss about the issue. So this is a kind of communication I think that I think need to be doing in filling the gap between what the gap between the foreign policy circle and the academia. And we can see here some of the essential issues as been touched by the term of reference. I mean, the term of reference asking what kind of essential issue that probably can be the object of the study of the academia. And I think these are the project, the potential project then can be addressed by the academia. ASEAN Study Center or any academia in ASEAN can contribute its role in form of whatever research you would like to have, in particular in aspect of becoming, because this is where we are lacking on the becoming. On the issue of interconnected, how do we do it? Connectivity. On dialogue cooperation, how do we do it? Development, etc. So far, I think this is the big question for all of us in ASEAN. How do we do it? And the question on how do we do it, probably academia can jump in and might help us in this regard. Because you can see how these difficulties that I present you map and images of connectivity, industrial park in ASEAN, Southeast Asia. Mostly the industrial park in Southeast Asia located in the western part of ASEAN. You can see the bright images coming from the satellite captured by the satellite. We used it in 2019. Probably more different now, right now, rather than the 5 years ago. And this is the location of the industrial park. Yeah, if you compare with the eastern part of ASEAN, mostly in Indonesia, it doesn't match. Yeah. In terms of,
I'm very sorry to interrupt. We have a few minutes left.
Okay, I will go quickly. In terms of factories, also there is a gap. This is very dark compared to the eastern part, western part of ASEAN, and etc. And I can go on with the slide and showing that we have problem on that. And I think if you see the survey released last year, I think by ECRs, many people in Asia still consider AoIP maybe it's not clear yet. Yeah, and it's a homework for all of us, especially Indonesia, who will take the chairmanship in 2023. And this is there are 6 top concerns in ASEAN, and if you see the top 3 concerns mostly with regard to external environment. But if you see this is the 4th concern, 28%, it's about ASEAN being perceived as elitist and disconnected from ordinary people. This is what I talked earlier, that the academia and foreign policy circle need to work together in that field. And I think external intervention, this is just a quick look at the how external environment affect our standing, especially in between rivalry between US and China, but the good things, the fascinating things coming out from the surveys, that ASEAN still stood on the option of enhancing more resilience and unity in vis-a-vis the pressure from the two major powers. But the question is it work in the real politics? I mean, in the autonomy strategy, as many scholars call it. I think I will be stopped there. The panelists already have my slide, and the last point I want to make is that to put my preach match with the policy, our agency lead the initiative, help the universities to establish a few or many study centers from University of Tanjung Pura, University Padang, Ahmad Dahlan, ASEAN Africa Studies in Erlangga, until Papua. So it shows what we preach, we do what we preach in the policy making, we implement what we preach, we try to embrace the universities that probably universities can help us filling the gap, as I have discussed or talked about it earlier. I think I'll stop there, and thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing further discussions on that. Thank you. Back to you, Yulida.
Thank you very much for this thought-provoking presentation. Before we delve deeper into this keynote speech and discuss further, I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers who have joined me today. I am honored to introduce to you our three panelists. And by being female, I would like to start our female speaker first. Allow me to introduce to you Ms. Prodita Sabarini, the Executive Director of the Conversation Indonesia. The Conversation Indonesia is part of a global nonprofit media network that brings editors and academics together to provide the public with evidence-based journalism. Prodita started her journalism career with the Jakarta Post, where she reported for the City, Sunday, and Special Reports desks. She is the 2013-2014 Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow and a 2019 Obama Foundation Asia Pacific Leader. Welcome to our talk, Ms. Prodita.
Thank you, Ms. Yulida. Hello, everyone.
I'm also accompanied by Mr. Lee Jung Yong from the ASEAN Secretariat. Mr. Lee Jung Yong is the Director for Community Affairs Directorate in the ASEAN Secretariat. He manages daily operations of the Community Relations Division and Information Resources Management Division. Mr. Jung Yong has almost 2 decades of work experience in international relations, public policy, and economic development. Prior to his current position, Mr. Jung Yong was the head for executive support in the Office of the Secretary General, where he provided the daily technical and administrative support to the FG of ASEAN. He started his career with the Singapore government at the Economic Development Board, where he undertook investment to Singapore. He had stint with the Singapore's Ministry of Home Affairs, managing the media and corporate relations and community outreach. Mr. Jung Yong also spent 4 years with the Institute of Policy Studies of Singapore, an outfit within the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, handling policy research and analysis for the economic and business cluster. Besides ASEAN Secretariat, his international experience included a 1-year appointment at the UNESCO based in Bangkok, Thailand, back in 2011. Mr. Jung Yong holds a Master of Science in International Relations from the Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies, now the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in the Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. He is also a Diplomat Fellow with the Center of Asian Studies at the University of Hong Kong. Pak Jung Yong, welcome to our talk today.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction.
And last but certainly not least, Dr. Alan Chong. Alan Chong is an associate professor at the Center for Multilateralism Studies within the RSIS Singapore. He has published widely on the notion of soft power and the role of ideas in constructing the international relations of Singapore and Asia. These ideational angles have also led to inquiry into some aspects of non-traditional security issues in Asia. His publications have appeared in the Pacific Review, Contemporary Southeast Asia Research, Cambridge Review of International Affairs, Armed Forces and Society, Journal of Strategic Studies, and the Review of International Studies. He has also edited the book International Security in the Asia-Pacific, Transcending ASEAN Towards Transitional Polycentricism, and served as co-editor of State, Society, and Information Technology in Asia. He's currently working on several projects exploring the notion of Asian international theory, and has just co-edited a volume with Kwang-Ming Pham titled Critical Reflections on China's Belt and Road Initiative. Mr. Alan Chong, welcome and thank you for being here today. So let us return to Mr. Takdir's presentation. From Mr. Takdir's presentation, we gather that the academic community has in fact always been the center of many policy making and policy changes which have affected humankind. I think one notion that resonated strongly with me is the ability for science to push barriers because science and data creates dialogue, and this in turn helps push or advocate for policy changes. I want to know what our panel thinks of this very interesting presentation. Therefore, I'd like to invite our speakers to deliver their brief remark on the matter. I'd like to start with Ms. Prodita.
Thank you, Ms. Yulida, and thank you, Mr. Takdir, for the really interesting presentation about academic engagement and foreign policy. I think I would provide my remarks based on my background as a journalist and as someone who works in the media. I think from some of the points that Mr. Takdir pointed out in the presentation is that I really like when he said that foreign policy needs to go local, and that means that it needs to involve citizens and that academia are part of that. But then he also mentioned that there's these perceptions about both the community of foreign policy community and academia. And it's very interesting to note that both is considered some kind of ivory tower community because of within the foreign policy, it's a high level political dialogue, and within academia, I think, and I'm sure Ms. Yulida and Mr. Alan Chong and Mr. Jung Yong can also share your perspective on that. But the idea of academia being in part of the ivory tower is because the knowledge is sometimes it's very technical and specific, and it's written in journals, academic journals, where not many people can access and understand the gist of what the findings would mean for regular people in regular daily life. But as you say, as Pak Takdir showed, that science and data is very important to provide solutions on different problems or various problems in terms of community building within ASEAN. The idea of how to create more interconnectedness, dialogue, and cooperation, and various science, from political science, sociology, social psychology, media and communication, that can provide some input and some insight on how to tackle those challenges. And one of the ways that I think is also important to bridge that gap between foreign policy, academia, and also the issue of ASEAN itself within the region is that we need to bring it closer to the people of how these important issues, from political security, from economics, digital technology, all of that relate to the lives of everyday people in ASEAN. And that's where communicating that connection between the policies that ASEAN is trying to build for the region, and how it can impact the people, and also how researchers can become that conduit as well, from understanding what the people want and what the people need, and bringing that data and that research to the foreign policy circles, and communicating that. And I think one of the ways that is very important to do that, like these events, these activities that UGM is currently doing, is very important. There's also various media channels and communication capacity that researchers and also the foreign policy, and I think the foreign policy MOFI in Indonesia are quite well equipped now with like digital diplomacy, and that's very important to constantly communicate with the people, constantly communicating the important research, the emerging issues, connecting them to everyday people's lives in language that they can understand, in articles, like, for example, maybe 800-word articles that everyone from like university students or high school students can understand, and teachers can use that to teach them to their students, and just making sure that there's communication, there's awareness from the people, there's engagement between everyday people with researchers and with diplomats within ASEAN region. So I think I'll stop there, and I'm very keen to explore more and discuss more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prodita. I absolutely agree with you on the importance of making science and knowledge more grounded to everyday people, because not everyone studies the things that we are studying, and it's important for knowledge to nonetheless be disseminated if we want to see the change that matters. I'd like to now invite Mr. Alan Chong to also share your insight. Mr. Alan, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yulida. I compliment Ambassador Takdir for a very comprehensive presentation, and I salute the aspirations that have been threaded throughout the presentation completely. However, in the interest of stimulating the discussion and debate and so on, let me put out 2 points that are a bit of amber lights, on these kinds of aspirations, where you hope that, to quote the words from one of his early slides, foreign policy can go local. Now, first of all, we have to be completely honest about ASEAN, all right? ASEAN is not an organization formed of consistently democracies as we understand it from most political science textbooks, all right? You go to Phnom Penh, you go to Tinmana, the capital of Myanmar, you ask them what is democracy. They will say one-party control. You come to my country, we will say there's democracy Singapore style, all right? And so on and so forth. So we have to accept that there is this structural conflict which we have to mediate between notions of national interests defined by the government in power and its institutional memory, and the idea of academia as a space where all kinds of research can take place. So this is, I think, the awkwardness when we look at the subject of this webinar today. Governments want to control the way citizens need to contribute to the national development. So I can't make this sound any more pleasant. All right, perhaps my 2 colleagues, Jung Yong and Ms. Pradita would disagree with me, and please do, The other point is when Ambassador Takdir mentioned US and Western academic and policy crossovers, all those names are from Joseph Nye to Henry Kissinger, to Ahmed Davutoglu and so on. You have to understand, in some of these countries, the think tank community is involved in a competitive political arena. So Joseph Nye was in favor because democratic administrations were in charge in the 70s, and of course more recently, under Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, he was favored. All right, then you shifted to Trump for a brief moment, and I stress for a brief moment, Henry Kissinger was welcomed into the White House as an ad hoc consultant, and then after that, okay, perhaps I draw on Ms. Sabarini's more recent acquaintance with the American scene. Then after that, all the right-wing think tankers were brought in, basically to legitimize whatever Trump wanted. And it goes on. And suspect with the dreadful events of yesterday, and we all know what happened yesterday, we see an old-fashioned 19th century style nationalist invasion of a neighbor. In Europe, I think a lot of think tanks would lose influence because they've been talking too much peace. Now they want people who are right-wingers to talk about how to roll back a potential future invasion of Western Europe by Russia and things like that. So I'm very careful when you invoke these Western examples because they exist and thrive in a competitive environment. So in ASEAN, I think we're a bit more middle of the road, but still figuring out how do we talk to governments without the governments telling us, look, you're working against national purposes, and so on. Okay, so I just end it there.
Thank you, Mr. Alan Chong. Very thought-provoking. Two main notions is that there is a strong nuance of undemocratic governments, and they are trying to control the way citizens contribute to the effort of regional development and to a larger extent also community building. And the fact that we have to also see how think tank communities are somewhat competing against each other in the attempt to influence policy changes and policy-making processes. I would like to invite Mr. Lee Jung Yong to share your remarks on the matter. Jung Yong.
Thank you. Thank you, Yulida. Taking the floor for the first time, so I want to say good morning to all the audience, and thank you, Pak Dafi, for your good remarks. Likewise, Pak Tadir, for people may find your presentation very comprehensive. I find that your presentation is interesting, and I couldn't get enough of it. But in any way, I'm not as controversial as Elena, but essentially I feel from where I'm sitting in the Secretariat, and for people who do not know, ASEAN Secretariat is actually based in Jakarta. I always try to, in my words, I try to bring ASEAN closer to the people through a few ways. One, obviously, through what we call the social media these days. Because based on all our surveys, 1/3 of ASEAN populace or ASEAN citizen, we call it, from the 10 countries actually get to know about news through social media. Because one is a young region, 1/3 of our people are below 35 years old. So that's where they get the news. Two, obviously, the other conventional media is also important, TV, radio, newspaper. And the third would be essentially through academia, through think tanks, through scholars. So this is how I interpret it. Essentially, how do we bring ASEAN closer to the people through media, which divide into new and conventional and scholars. And obviously, there are others way, but just like specialists, just like ASEAN, we know what certain jargons or certain abbreviation in ASEAN mean. But then again, not everybody knows. If you ask a Bluebird taxi driver in Jakarta, for example, he may not know what in the world you're talking about. So in terms of language-wise, I agree we have to use simple language, or at least what I'm doing on a daily basis. We try to laymanize the language, press releases, documents. Even though we know it's difficult because ASEAN is quite a, quite a old organization in that sense. We are celebrating our 55th anniversary this year. So there are certain way of doing things in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of consultation with the 10 capitals. So there are certain way of doing things, and it's not as easy as what people think. We can just, at a snap of finger, make ASEAN easy to read so suddenly. So essentially, everybody has a role to play, all the stakeholders, as I mentioned, media, think tanks, academia, scholars, even young people, youth, schools, CSOs, the civil society organization. So all of us got a role to play to bring ASEAN closer to the people. And we are talking about 660 million people as of 2020 number, the figure based on 2020. 660 million people, all the way from, as what Alan said, from Myanmar, Naypyidaw, all the way to Jayapura of Indonesia. That big. So essentially, yeah, this is what I think. And if you look at my background picture, the 5 founding fathers, I put this out. I have a special meaning to it. I intend to tell a story. Out of the 5 founding fathers, as we know, from Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, 3 of them are actually journalist trained. Pak Adam Malik, we know, Indonesia, founded Antara. So it's very simple, given his journalism training. Pak Nariso Ramos from Philippines, he's a journalist as well. And I think for Singapore, S. Rajaratnam, he's also a journalist. He was a journalist. So out of the 5 founding fathers of ASEAN, 3 are journalists. So that probably tells you a story how ASEAN was formed in those days, and how do we, bring ASEAN closer to the people those days. And with technology now, with innovation now, with gadget now, with education now, I think it should make it easier. And this is why I think it goes back to my point that everybody has a role to play. So I just end there as well. I like what I hear from Ibu Pradita. She was talking very, she actually took some words out of my mouth, and I do not want to repeat what she said. But essentially, yes, I tend to take her side of how we can symbolize certain ASEAN languages. So Ibu Yulida, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Jung Yong. To reiterate your point on the role that everyone has to play in order to bring ASEAN closer to the people within ASEAN is something that I think cannot be stressed enough. And there is urgency in using effective and grounded language in order for this to happen, because after all, we are a community of many cultures, of many people and many elements of society. And in order for us to create a strong community, it's important to think about the way we communicate with each other. And ultimately, this also falls on the shoulders of researchers as people who produce science and knowledge to make information more grounded, to make knowledge more grounded. So with all these points in mind, I would like to invite Pak Muhammad Takdir to provide a response. Pak Takdir.
Thank you, Bu Yulia. I go first to Ms. Sabarini. I think I agree that data-driven is very crucial and vital for our sound foreign policy or any public policy, I think. If you don't have data and then you just kind of pick up something from somewhere and then you can be accountable for that. You cannot responsible for anything goes wrong if it is something goes wrong. But with data-driven, it will help us. I can give you a few example. I think when the trade wars happened between Australia and China, many products coming from China has to do with the high tariff line from the Australia, vice versa. And then foreign policy strategy agencies try to find out what kind of product, Chinese product, that have difficulties enter the market of Australia because of the trade war. And then we identify like 4 or 5 products, and then during the 1 year, it shows in the data that this product increased because of the trade war happening between Australia and China. So we don't want to get advantage from the problem that they're facing between the two, but I think the decision to get benefit from this kind of situations is based on what kind of data we have in Australian market, provided by our embassy, our embassy and all our consulate general in Australia provide that data. So we decide, and then that's perfect. But there is also one data that missed with regard to AUKUS. If you see that in Lowy Institute, they have a chart when, if we study the chart in 2020 or 2019, we may not be surprised with the decision of Canberra to with the UK and US in having AUKUS, because it shows already that they have the decrease of military capability in the chart, in the survey. The indicator of the military capability decreased, but they have increased defense network. So in other words, they want to, to convert the inability in military capability by having more networks in defense. That's why they dispatch many probably contact missions, defense missions to UK and to US. Then finally they have AUKUS, and we surprised, ASEAN surprised. But we can trace that actually the maneuver from 2020 if we study the data. That's the kind of, I think, why I said data driven important, and it will be provided by the academia mostly because of their day-to-day routine activities. With regard to Dr. Chong, I think as official, I can't say I don't agree or I agree. Diplomats sometimes avoid that kind of gestures. But if you see my slide in the democratic index, it shows that based on the survey provided by Economic Intelligence Unit, most of the ASEAN countries or Southeast Asia countries are actually categorized as flawed democracy. Flawed democracy meaning, they have election fair and free, yeah. Basic civil liberty are honored, but they still have an issue on media freedom infringement. You know, sometimes government puts something on the media and the positions. That's a flawed democracy. And actually, it will be a problem for us. You have seen that in Myanmar. It's not flawed democracy, it's authoritarian. But it's kind of template practical from the many countries. If you have level of democracy that you still allow or deviate a full democracy from the practice, I think it's just only about time. Then middle class will aware of, citizen will aware of, and then suddenly you have a revolution. That's the, I think, saying that the think tank in Western countries more competitive, I agree. And we need to push that kind of spirit too in ASEAN. We need to push the kind of spirit in ASEAN. Our think tank, our centers, like ASEAN Study Centers. That's why I open all the possibility of the object of research. Why don't you study this? And then later you invite the government to discuss about that. Let's see how the government respond to that. So that's the kind of why I'm free to talk about this, because basically our work is like a policy lab. In policy lab, you are free to, you know, you say something, there is no reference because you are in the policy lab. In policy lab, sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right. So I agree that that's the one of the reason why the think tank the scholar produced by competitive think tanks is really reliable compared to ASEAN itself. To Mr. Yang, there are two things. The challenge for ASEAN Secretariat. I think we need to bring also to the attention of ASEAN member states, other ASEAN member states. In bringing people closer to ASEAN, two things you need to notice. ASEAN, like you said, need to have a simple language. The document you produce, 1,000 documents. We have many conferences. We have like 1,000 blah, blah, blah meetings within ASEAN. You have many project plans put in place. Even in ASEAN connectivity plan, master plan of ASEAN connectivity, you see there are, if you go to the document, you see there are many projects committed by the members, but it called initiatives. But when you see the other column of the paper of the document, it says 11 initiatives, 1 done, 2 accomplished, 1 done, 2 accomplished. So this I think we have been in the paradox of plenty. We are tend to have a lot of issues, a lot of projects, but we don't have really strong funding on that. That's why we call upon China to funding the infrastructures in ASEAN. When we call China to fund the infrastructure of connectivity, the Western is whining. I have several meetings with the Australian and the UK, and I said, why you keep whining about ASEAN to lean to China? If you cannot provide what ASEAN needs. China is the only country extend the hand to ASEAN to build Kunming Railway to Singapore, to build Kunming Railway to Kiutiao in Myanmar, or to fund the Bandung Jakarta Railway, speed railway. Where is Australia? I said, where is Australia? Where are you? You can assist us in build the connectivity in the eastern part of Indonesia. We have 5 provinces, Melanesian province. Its proximity close to Australia. But why you don't jump on that kind of, or you develop kind of project relevant to their needs of the 5 provinces of Melanesian province? They can't answer it. They said this about ideological and then blah blah blah. But I think being pragmatical, ASEAN will take whatever aids, whatever development plan coming from. We don't see like Deng Xiaoping said, we don't care about the cat, it's brown or red, as long as it can catch me as mice. So that's important for ASEAN, because we push our ASEAN centrality. It's our need, it's our own interest, not somebody's interest, not American interest, not China's, it's our needs. The same thing will happen when I talk about China and Australian trade war. We don't care. Yeah, we care about avoiding conflict, but I think ASEAN in this regard is being pragmatic. That's all I think for me, Ibu Yuli, for my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takdir, for the response. Now that the discussions have started, first of all, allow me to address our audience watching from home. For those of you who wish to participate, please use the chat box feature or use the raise hand feature to take part in the discussion directly. We look forward to your participation also. But if I may, I'd like to jump into our next question. This was previously mentioned by our panelists. ASEAN is said to be a fast-growing region, despite the fact that a number of its member states fall into the developing category. The truth is that ASEAN remains the third largest economy in the world. However, its economic potential does not necessarily translate into a strong community. Issues continue to emerge and often test the strength of the ASEAN member states as a united front. So some to name are the negotiations of the South China Sea, the rivalry of power between United States and China, and so on. And so part of the academic community and leading figures yourself, it can't be easy to sit back and watch. So could you perhaps share with us what you think are the most urgent issues surrounding ASEAN or the region today? I'd like to start with Pak Jung Yong first.
Thank you. Before I start, just a small correction. ASEAN today is the 5th largest, not the 3rd largest economy in the world.
Oh no, I was actually hoping it was.
We are the 5th largest. We are behind, obviously, US, China, and in the order US, China, Japan, Germany, and then where we are. But only if we are one. The fact is, remain we are not one. So that's a minor clarification. Your main question posed to me was, what is the key challenge facing ASEAN today? I think obviously we are looking at how do we recover from post-COVID. The urgent task now. This is something the leaders are always deliberating. As we talk about ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, how do we restore confidence to bring life back to slightly normal in the pre-COVID days? Now, on the longer term, I would think it's really the urgent need to narrow the development gap. Yes, ASEAN on the whole is energetic, young, and doing well. And among the newer member countries, we are seeing, Vietnam growing very fast, Cambodia growing very fast. But then again, how about likes of Myanmar? How about the likes of Laos? So there are still certain countries in the region that are still considered lower income. The advanced economy, Singapore, Brunei, are still, even though yes, we are the region is troubled by COVID this 2 years. So does the world. But on the whole, there's this need to narrow the development divide or gap, what we call it, between the advanced and the low income. So this is why I think there was a compelling need for the region to come together to talk about a community building, ASEAN community, in the hope that growth can be more well spread out, equitable growth, development can be more spread out. And I think this is something, it will remain a challenge in the foreseeable future. Pak Tadir mentioned about certain projects remain, connectivity projects remain on the shelf. That's the other characteristic of ASEAN. We always, OPM, we call it, use other people's money to grow, OPM. So this is why I think in that sense, there is also a need for us to start to, in a broader movement of ASEAN centrality, the need to also build up reserve, resources. There are, but not as much as what the neighbors can share with us, our neighbors. Bearing in mind, when we talk about the 3 northern neighbors, CJK, China, Japan, Korea, these are all countries within the top 10 biggest GDP economy. Whereas in ASEAN, our largest economy, Indonesia, is number 16 in the world. So this is where you see the disparity between what is developed developing and underdeveloped or low income we call it. So I hope I answer your question, Bu Yulida. Thank you.
Thank you, Jung Yong. So post-COVID.
Bu Yuli, can I ask Pak Yong before I forget, Pak Yong, do you think that considering that one of the lack of support in funding, because we much rely on ASEAN Development Bank, right, on the project of many project of ASEAN besides China and Japan, for instance. Do you think that it's about time to have particular ASEAN Central Bank, or the way when member countries can rely on particular ASEAN Bank, not ASEAN Development Bank, but ASEAN Bank. Yeah, that's my question. So yeah,
I think in terms of technical assistance, to have such a bank would be ideal. Obviously, it fits into what the region is planning to do. As I mentioned, ASEAN is growing, is young, is energetic. So a bank like this would be obviously useful in theory, on paper. But then again, the practical question remains: who will fund it? Many will say Indonesia should do it because you are the largest economy in Southeast Asia. But then again, there may be reasons why Jakarta may say yes, may say no. So I think this is why under the ASEAN framework, there are liberties for certain connectivity projects to be either studied from a bilateral basis between countries to countries, whether you're neighbor or through a third party, or through donors or development partners like ADB, as you mentioned, or AIIB, spearheaded by China. So these are all things that are what we call under the ASEAN framework, member states can pursue individually. So I think maybe that is the best way for now. I personally do not know enough whether the timing or the ground is sweet enough for such a development bank in ASEAN to be launched. But my practical question will obviously be who will fund it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jung Yong and Pak Takdir. I'd now like to invite comments from Alan to address the question of what critical and emerging issues do you feel require the intensive role of the academic community?
Okay, I second what Jung Yong just said. Now, in terms of an ASEAN central bank, I think we need to study the lessons of the European Central Bank carefully. And you also need to bear in mind why the British voted to leave the European Union. One of the big issues people forget, apart from immigration and the idea that Britain remains a sovereign power and things like that, is the idea of the politics of monetary control. And in ASEAN, I think it's going to be heavily and I think unhelpfully politicized across all the jurisdictions, because in some economies, whom I shall not mention, all right, the economy is used to fund certain political causes that are local in nature. Now, a central bank, if it claims to have regional status, cannot be allowed to be captured by these kinds of local political currents. Now, having said that, I think one important burning issue, apart from COVID-19, which I totally agree with Lee Jung Yong on, is the idea of encouraging the peoples across the length and breadth of ASEAN to connect. All right, you talk about interdependence. It should not be an abstract economic interdependence. It should be also an interdependence across academia, across civil society. Only then, I think, can we develop as a region. We have to come to this understanding that an economic recovery, say in Indonesia, is intimately tied to economic recovery in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Philippines, in Laos, in Phnom Penh, and so on and so forth. So until this kind of ground level consciousness is there, I do not think that we should look at the big issues yet. And COVID-19 has unfortunately lifted curtain on national solutions to regional issues. Okay, unfortunately, that is the case. you look at how border closures have happened. All right, it reveals that we are a long way from an ASEAN consciousness. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alan. So the politics of monetary control will hopefully not be present across ASEAN in the years to come, but this is what we should be wary of as funding for research and funding in general becomes scarce, and the need to connect among the academic community as well as civil society in order to develop as a united front. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Ms. Prodita.
Thank you, Ms. Yulida. Listening to Pak Takdir, Mr. Jung Yong, Mr. Alan, I think we're facing like a wicked problem that it's not easy to solve. I was very interested listening to Pak Takdir and also the response from Pak Jung Yong about ASEAN Central Bank, and then listening to Pak Alan about how there would be politics of monetary control. And I'd like to also mention from my side my answer to the question of what is the emerging issues that we need to put attention to, of course, is I think what Alan also mentioned before is the declining democracy within the region. And Pak Takdir mentioned that, in ASEAN, the Economic Intelligence Unit calls the region as, flawed democracy. Indonesia was like the kind of, I guess, example of democratization, but in the past decade, we see that it's declining. So I think within the Indonesian academic community, that should be part of an area of concern and research. And also it also impacts the academics as well in terms of research funding and research that we could do. But I think we should not let go of our attention of making sure that democracy, the strengthening of democracy and promoting democracy in the region. Within the declining democracy, I think there is that, sometimes pressure on media freedom, but with academics, you have the power of data. You have the power that this is not just coming from thin air. You have evidence, and that communicating that evidence, having that base is important. I also would like to mention, I second Alan about interconnectedness. I think one of the ways to deal with this wicked problem is to make sure that we join forces, we collaborate, we seek out building networks and making sure that we're creative in finding solutions of these volatile situation in the region. That's for me, Yulida.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prodita, seconding the notion of the decline of democracy across the region, as we see even the most extrovert democratic countries are being questioned on their decisions regarding the region. We have to put that hand in hand with the importance of creating evidence-based research to instill the power of data. I'd like to address a raised hand from one of our audience who would like to join the discussion. I'd like to invite Hataya VSO. Hello, Miss.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and also the panelists. I just been listening to the session and really enjoy the insight and also the the conversation. And I think one of the things that I like to share, coming from the experience of VSO, which we are the development organization working in 4 countries in the region. So Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar are the areas of our work. I think I really wanted to share my thoughts about how we make sure we have the voice of the community in the political forum, in the policy forum. And for me, one of the tools that that I like to share is the most marginalized community. We work with them through what we call the citizen-led monitoring process, which one of the tools is the community scorecard, where we make sure that the language of the policy that may affecting their life is translating into something that very simple and something that they can understand, and they can reflect on what they like to happen, what will help their life better. Which this is the area that we use in order to bring the voice from the most marginalized community into the policy forum. And like Ms. Sabrini say, about being data-driven, being and put that in the research so that it's put on the table. I think that's I wanted to highlight and support that very much. And I think that's the time that we have to make sure that we are able to connect to the people that needed the support from the academic communities, from the policy communities, and also from the government and CSO and everyone. So yeah, I think that's part that I like to come here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hataya. A very relevant question, and this is something we often ask ourselves as part of the community, which is how do we make our voices heard in international and regional forums, or even just as an individual, especially in the context of marginalized communities or grassroots communities. Often their voices are unheard when the policies that they fight for are great and large in scale. And this is also to highlight the fact that in many cases, grassroots communities or marginalized communities are unsung heroes in their respective environments. I would like to ask this question to Pak Muhammad Takdir, as perhaps this would relate to the way policies are made. Pak Takdir, perhaps if you could shed light on this question.
If I can understood well, the question is about how the aspirations being heard or channeled by the people and then reach the government desk, and they understand the solution they provide to the people, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think I actually touched this in part of my early slides, where I said that academia or any citizens, when you have a new government, voicing the interest at the early stage, because during that time we have like in our case in Indonesia, we have a mid-term development plan, long-term development plan. So if you have a new government installed like in October or November because of after the election, then the academia should voicing the aspirations or the interest of the people, so it can reach the new government. That's the tips I guess need to be done, because if the government already put in place what they planned, and then we don't contribute it earlier, because of lack of understanding and a lack of attentions, then you can't do nothing. So voicing the aspiration at the early stage as much as possible, because during that time is very effective. But this is not without the dangerous. It has also a tricky situations, because sometimes you try to notice when you have a new government, everybody talk about foreign policy as they're smart in the foreign policy, because they're probably hoping to be elected as a foreign minister. They write about infrastructure. They write about something that probably not their interest, their expertise, because some motive that we don't know. But I think I noticed that kind of phenomenon when you have a new government. Everybody writes in the paper about things that probably draw the interest of the new government. Hoping to be elected is not a crime. But I think, like I said, we need academia to maintain its critical positions. Avoid being irrelevant, but still try to maintain being a critical views that might help the government to see the different parts of the issue that might be overlooked by some of their inner circle. And it is important. You see, on the issue of maritime fulcrum, when the new government newly installed, we are like having euphoria of maritime fulcrum. But do the academia pay attention? How do we document the policy on maritime fulcrum? As far as I know, it's already interpreted. If I use the language by Hataya, it's only interpreted by having highway, toll highway, toll out. Toll out is locating in the internal waters. In internal waters, the concept of UNCLOS, internal waters actually like river, like lake. But because this is archipelago, what seems to be open seas in the past is now internal waters of the archipelago context. So to have maritime fulcrum only resemble the internal waters transportation is not really maritime fulcrum, because maritime fulcrum is the ability to expand our maritime power across the ocean. And Indonesia located between the two oceans, important oceans, and the two important continents. So I think my advice is try to set the mood at the early stage, so academia can feel what needs to be done by the new installed administration. Yeah, thank you
very much, Muhammad. Thank you very much for the remarks. I am told by the committee we have to end at 11:30 to allow time for Friday prayers. I'll try my best, but we have one question which I think is very interesting to discuss while we have the time. And we discussed this earlier. On top of the difficulty of conducting research and being in the business of knowledge production, we are seeing a trend where ASEAN issues are becoming less and less popular, especially among the youth. And one reason for this is the frustration of the progress on political, security, and economic issues. A very strong elitist nuance and overall indifference towards the development of the region is also one of the reasons for this. What I wish to learn from you is, what do you think we can do, again, as researchers and part of the ASEAN community, to engage the communities to revive the ASEAN spirit, or on a more broader sense, a regional spirit? If I may, I'd like to start with Pak Jung Yong first.
You are always asking me the most difficult question. Can I just put up the slide that I share with the organizer? Can you just help me to put up just the first one? I didn't get to use this earlier, but I just want to quickly show you. I know time, I'm probably one of the reasons between you and the Friday prayer. But essentially, this is how we look at ASEAN. And I think Alan probably in some way will concur with me. Track 1, there's no need for me to explain. We are talking about countries. National Secretariat, especially those are within the MFA, CAMLU. We are 1.5. These are centers and organs that ASEAN initiated, but a bit more, grassroots. ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, for example. Track 2 are what we call the think tanks, the academy. And then track 3, unofficially we have a track 3, CSOs. So you ask me how can the academy work with states, work with institutions like ASEAN Secretariat to bring ASEAN closer to people? Well, I think this is what I'm trying to say through this slide is already we recognize academia is an important stakeholder. You have a role to play. That's why we recognize you as track 2. It is really up to the various scholars, the think tanks who work directly with their own national secretariat through CAMLU or through even institutions like us, ASEAN Secretariat. Every year I convene a session for what we call the Entities Forum, where I gather. Can I go to the next slide? Every year, with some money set aside from some donors, I convene a forum of entities. ASEAN entities are actually listed in Annex 2 of the ASEAN Charter. Please get a book of this. Please get a whole of this little green book called ASEAN Charter through our website or a hard copy. Next. As of today, there are about 77 entities that are associated with ASEAN. That means they can use the ASEAN logo, ASEAN name to do their activities. And think tanks, obviously, there are 4 of them, think tank academia. The rest are all grassroots organizations, CSOs, business organizations, who are state-led, parliamentarian and judiciary. Others are 10, including your ASEAN Layang Association, or ASEAN, Textile Association. So very grassroots. And in that sense, what I'm trying to say is ASEAN is open. We are happy for you to study us, to work with us, to collaborate with us. So throughout the process, we hope that whether it is responsible journalism can be promoted or for the academia, the think tankers to write about ASEAN more factually. So this is really the aim. And as I said, my end in mind, where I'm sitting, is really to bring ASEAN closer to the 660 million people. So I hope in some way I answer Yulida's question. It takes both ways for us to work together. The door for us is open. And through some of these avenues, we welcome inquiry and collaboration with the scholars and researchers, think tankers. And in fact, I just give my email privately to Ibu Prodita as well, because I think there's some way we can work with her media organization outfit in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Jung Yong. Looking forward also to work closer with the ASEAN Secretariat and also the many entities of ASEAN. I'd now like to invite Mr. Alan Chong, your 2 cents, sir.
Well, I applaud what the ASEAN Secretariat is doing. In fact, yes, I second everything that you said, but I also believe that individual initiative is important. Networking, that's what a lot of us were doing, and I believe that one of your partners in today's event is the Ateneo de Davao University in the Philippines. If there's any representative out there, this is a shout out, a hello to you. Why do I mention this university in the Philippines? Because this is a good example of what I mean by personal initiative. I and a group of Philippine academics are starting this network where we're trying to look at how Southeast Asia's pre-modern past has got clues as to how the ASEAN modus operandi, or what you call the ASEAN way, is actually a very unique way of building community without having too many rules set in stone. So, it is networks like these that allow us to get to know ASEAN better and to actually build this core of people who believe that, look, we need to look beyond the national boundaries and connect as professionals, as citizens, and so on, with common interests. And I think looking over the horizon, I'm surprised no one has brought up climate change yet. Climate change is one common concern that affects all of us across the length and breadth of ASEAN, whether you're in Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore, the Philippines. The waters are coming to us, all right? So we have to collaborate and so on in terms of imposing carbon taxes, carbon restrictions, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Alan. I now would like to invite Ms. Prodita.
Thank you, Ms. Yulida. I appreciate this initiative to hold this event from the ASEAN Studies Center. I really enjoyed listening to all the panelists from Pak Takdir, from Mr. Jung Yong, Pak Alan, and realizing that we don't have simple answers on tackling the problems that we have. And I also appreciate Mr. Takdir, who says that, for academia, for the researchers to continue to become a critical voice. And that's very refreshing and heartening, that to realize that, because sometimes within the civil society, within the media, there's always these deadlocks of we're suspicions as well towards the government, and sometimes for often for very valid reasons, because of what the reality on the ground, and realizing that there's voices that continue to ensure principles of academic freedom, of having citizens to be able to participate in the decision making of their communities. That's very important. I really appreciate you providing that tactic of understand the policy cycle of the government, understand the policy cycle of the government, pay attention, be active. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate from Pat Alan that there are institutions. What ASEAN Secretariat is doing is very important. There's all of these tracks, and the academia and the civil society organization should use those avenues. But also we have to always build networks, creating these activities and programs together, communicating that to the public, and making sure that we have a lively public discussion continuously in discussing about potential solutions for the region, including about the declining democracy, climate crisis, food security, and many other important issues that we face. So that's from me. Thank you, Bu Yulida.
Thank you, Ms. Prodita. To add on to this discussion, as part of the university community, the ASEAN Studies Center also engages the youth and students of the university, as our belief is that they are an integral part of the development of the region and ASEAN's community building efforts. In so saying, we have also invited a representative of the
Universitas Gadjah Mada ASEAN Society, which is a student-run organization based in the university focusing on ASEAN issues. And representing the society is Miss Felicitas Chaya, who we have invited to respond from the perspective of the youth and shed light on what the community has been working on to sort of revive the ASEAN community building spirit. Ms. Felicitas, I present you the screen.
Am I audible? Okay, so I would like to say thank you for the panelists for the presentations. And as we know, we need collaborations between policymakers and academics to contribute to regional development and foreign policy. As Pak Takdir stated, that academics can be important for conflict resolutions and negotiating. And I agree with that. However, the consequences that rise when academics are close to the government are that all knowledge and research cannot be separated from political or national interest. And you also mentioned that we academics have to poison our aspiration as much as we can. And based on that correlations between academics and policymakers, I would like to ask first, what is exactly the role and the positions of academics in a state or regional institutions? And how important is the role of academics for policymakers? And the second is how can policymakers make schools and universities a place to produce research and science? Because right now, as students, I feel our orientations is only to be educated workers in the company or bureaucracy, especially for natural science major students. On the other hand, I believe if humans are given the freedom to think, they can produce a lot of knowledge, which can lead to domestic and regional development. But now we still rely on Western productions of knowledge. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Felicitas. I think these questions are directed to Mr. Takdir. If I may request ever so kindly and politely to keep the response very brief, as I will have to stick to the TOR. Pak Takdir, yeah. Time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Willie. Felicitas, I put in the very simple word. Let President Sukarno said, give me 10 youths, and I'll conquer the world. In my case, give me 1, 2 strong academia, and we change the landscape. So that's reflecting how important the academia or the universities. Few of our work in foreign policy analysis involving university. The project of connectivity Andaman Nicobar Island with the Aceh Sabang Aceh, is studied by University Muslim and Malikus Salian in Aceh with the Jawaharlal Nehru College. The connectivity Bitung Davao and Davao Bitung and Santos, General Santos in Philippines, also studied by the university that mentioned by Dr. Chong, with the university in North Sulawesi. So that will manifest the importance of the academia, the importance of the university in this process. And I believe that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Takdir. Very uplifting, and this is exactly the spirit that we want to close the discussion today. And I'm afraid this is all the time that we have for. It's been an extremely interesting discussion. I do apologize that we don't have time for more. We hope to be able to meet you again next year as we open our doors, hopefully no longer virtually. But for now, thank you once again to our panel of speakers for taking part in our event today. We truly appreciate the time that you've taken out of your busy schedules to be with us. And for everyone joining us at home, thank you as well. Please stay safe and take care. I yield my time to Tunggul.
All right, thank you, Ms. Yulida, for moderating our dialogue today. And also thank you very much again for our esteemed speakers. Thank you for your participation and insightful views regarding for today's webinar topic. And thank you for answering the questions from our participants. I'm really sure there are a lot of key takeaways that we can learn and reflect from today's discussion. So for all the participants, on behalf of our center, thank you for joining this webinar. And to claim your e-certificate, don't forget to
scan the barcode and fill out the evaluation form through the link shared on the chat box, or you may scan the barcode provided through the screen. And let's stay in touch with us by subscribing to our YouTube channel at ASEAN Studies Center and our Instagram at AAC UGM, and visit our official website at aac.visipo.ugm.ac.id to get to know more about ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and also to participate in our upcoming events. So I'll end it here. I hope you'll always be safe and healthy. Once again, thank you very much for your participation, and I'll see you on our next event. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pak Chong, Bu Yuli, Pak Dapri.
Thank
Pak
you.
Thank you,
Pak
everyone.
Takdir, Pak Chong.
Rita ya.
Thank you, everyone.
Rita. Mohon lihat ya.
See you, Pak.
Ya,
Bye,
sehat
bye.
semua. Ya, bye.
Ya.
Pamit ya.
Bye.
Sampai jumpa.
See.